"It's a game, my love," she said, her voice barely steady. "We're playing hide and seek." Amara grinned, her milky white eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "I'll count to 10, then I'll find you."
Subscribe.
The night was thick with fog, swallowing the towering trees in a suffocating embrace. Shadows stretched like clawed fingers across the earth, and the air carried the heavy scent of damp soil and rotting leaves. The forest was no place for a child, especially not one who couldn't see. Yet here Amara stood, clutching her mother's trembling hand, her unseeing eyes turned toward the sky as if the stars could whisper answers to her. "Mama, where are we going?" Her voice was small, trusting. Ijioma's fingers tightened around her daughters before she forced herself to release them. She couldn't let doubt creep in, not now. Not when she had already made the decision. The weight of the past months pressed down on her. The taunts from villagers who called Amara cursed, the gnawing hunger, the shame of failing as a mother. "It's a game, my love," she said, her voice barely steady. "We're playing hide and seek." Amara grinned, her milky white eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "I'll count to 10, then I'll find you." She turned toward the trees, beginning her count. 1, 2, 3. Ijeoma took a step back, then another. 4, 5. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. 6, 7. Tears blurred her vision. 8, 9. She turned and ran. Amara's voice rang out behind her. 10. "Ready or not, here I come." But there was no one to find. Silence stretched, cold and consuming. At first, she giggled, thinking her mother was hiding. But the seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into an hour. "Mama?" The darkness answered with rustling leaves. Panic set in. Amara stumbled forward, her small hands reaching for the world she could not see. Her foot caught on a root, and she crashed to the ground. Pain shot through her knees, but she didn't cry. Instead, she listened. The forest was alive. Something slithered nearby. A branch snapped. A distant howl echoed through the trees. She was alone. She wasn't meant to survive. The forest does not forget. But Amara did not die that night. For hours she sat, waiting. Then the smell of burning wood tickled her nose, smoke, faint but present. Her ears caught the distant crackle of a fire. Someone was nearby. Guided by sound and scent, she crawled, then stumbled forward, deeper into the unknown. The air grew thick with the scent of herbs and something richer. Stew. "Who's there?" A raspy voice broke through the darkness. Amara froze. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. Then a wrinkled hand brushed against her cheek. A child. That was how she met Mama Uduak, the old healer who lived in exile. A woman the villagers feared. A woman who, instead of turning her away, took her in. The years passed, and under Mama Uduak's guidance, Amara learned. She learned to listen, to truly listen. She could hear the whispers in the wind, the lies in a man's voice, the fear in a heartbeat. Though her sight was gone, she saw more than most. She became something greater than a lost child. She became a legend. By the time she was 20, people traveled for days to seek the wisdom of the blind oracle of the forest. She never lied, never faltered, and never let mercy cloud her judgment. Then, one day, fate knocked on her door. A mother's desperate plea. The woman who stumbled into the oracle's dwelling was barely recognizable. Her once proud frame was frail, her eyes sunken with suffering. Ijeoma had lost everything: her home, her dignity, her peace. Haunted by the child she had abandoned, she had searched for years, but Amara was nowhere to be found. Now, she had come to beg the oracle for help, not knowing she was walking straight into her past. She fell to her knees. "Oracle, I have wronged someone beyond measure," she choked out.
I have suffered. I have nothing left. Please, tell me if there is hope for me." Silence. Then Amara stepped forward, her white eyes locked onto the woman's trembling frame. The moment she spoke, her voice was steady, powerful. "What do you seek, woman? Forgiveness or redemption?" Ijoma gasped. The voice, the presence, the scent. "Amara," she whispered, horror and disbelief crashing into her like a wave. The oracle remained still, her face unreadable. Ijoma reached for her, but a gust of wind pushed her back, as if the forest itself had passed judgment. I searched for you," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. I suffered. I lost everything." Amara tilted her head, as if listening to something beyond this world. And what of the little girl who cried alone in the dark? Did she not suffer? Tears streamed down Ijoma's face. "Please, I am your mother." The words were a knife in the air between them. For the first time, emotion cracked Amara's voice. A mother. Her fingers curled into fists. A mother does not leave her child to the mercy of the forest. Ijoma trembled. "Then tell me, do I have hope?" The air turned cold. The trees seemed to whisper. Finally, Amara spoke. "The forest does not forget, neither do I."
Ijoma collapsed at Amara's feet, her frail body racked with sobs. The oracle remained still, her blind eyes unblinking as if she were looking through her mother, beyond her. The forest had kept its secrets well. It had swallowed the past, molding Amara into something more than a child left for dead. She was no longer the helpless girl who had waited for her mother's return. She was the one people came to for answers, for truth. Yet even as she stood before the woman who had forsaken her, something inside her wavered. She could end this suffering now. She could turn Ijoma away, let the forest do as it pleased. Let fate finish what had begun years ago. Or she could... No. The wind whispered, stirring the torches that lined the oracle's hut. It carried a message. Something was coming. The decision could wait. "Leave," Amara said coldly. "Return when the moon is full and you will have your answer." Ijoma lifted her tear-streaked face. "Amara, please, Go." The wind howled through the trees, as if the very forest was commanding obedience. Ijoma staggered back, her face a mix of anguish and hope. She bowed her head and turned away. That night, as Amara sat in the dim glow of the fire, a sound reached her ears. Footsteps, stealthy, deliberate, circling the hut. Not the hesitant shuffle of a desperate woman, but something else. Someone was watching. She closed her eyes, tuning into the sounds of the forest. Her pulse slowed. There, beyond the trees, a breath hitched. The soft creak of leather. A shift in the wind. A hunter. "Show yourself," she commanded. The forest was silent for a heartbeat. Then, a man stepped into the firelight. He was tall, clad in dark, tattered robes. His face was half hidden in shadow, but his presence sent a chill down her spine. "You knew I was here," he said, his voice smooth but edged with danger. "I hear what others do not," Amara replied. "Why are you here?" The man tilted his head, studying her as if she were a puzzle. "To deliver a message." She waited. "The woman you turned away tonight," he continued, stepping closer, "was meant to die in the forest years ago." A cold weight settled in Amara's chest. "Explain." The man smirked. "Your mother, Ijoma, she was marked for death. She was to be sacrificed for a debt she could not repay." Amara's hands curled into fists. "A debt?" The man crouched, his piercing gaze locked onto her. "Your father. He was a desperate man. He made promises to men more powerful than himself. When he could not pay, they took the next best thing, his wife." Amara's breath hitched. Her father. The man who had vanished before she was old enough to remember him. "You lie," she said. The man chuckled. I do not lie. I deal in truths, much like you. He reached into his robe and tossed something onto the ground between them. A necklace. Amara stiffened. She knew that necklace. It had once belonged to her mother. The man leaned in. She abandoned you not out of cruelty, but because she was running. The moment she left you in the forest, she became a dead woman walking. And now, he grinned. They found her again. Amara's blood turned to ice. She will not survive the full moon, the man said, standing. Not unless you stop them. Amara remained silent, her mind racing. She had spent years believing her mother had chosen to leave her, that she had been discarded like nothing more than a burden. But what if she had been wrong? What if Ijoma had left her not to escape Amara, but to escape death? And now, death was coming for her again. Amara lifted her head, her voice steady. Who sent you? The man smiled, turning to disappear into the night. But before he stepped into the shadows, he paused. A man who should be dead. Then he was gone. Amara sat in the flickering firelight, gripping the necklace in her palm. Her entire world had just shifted. Had she condemned her mother to a fate she did not deserve? Had she spent years hating a woman who had been trying to protect her? She had until the full moon to decide, to let her mother die, or to save her. And if she chose the latter, she would have to face the one ghost she had never been prepared to meet. Her father, the man who should be dead. The night was restless. The wind carried the scent of rain, stirring the trees into a whispering frenzy. Amara sat motionless by the fire, turning the old necklace over in her fingers. The smooth, time-worn pendant was cold against her palm, yet the weight it carried was unbearable. She had spent years convincing herself she felt nothing for the woman who had abandoned her. But now, the stranger's words haunted her. She was meant to die in the forest. A man who should be dead. Her father. The one who had vanished before she could form memories of him. The one she had assumed had either died or left without a care. Now, the past was clawing its way back. The full moon was approaching. If she did nothing, her mother would die. Amara had every reason to let it happen. But some unrelenting force inside her, refused to stay still. By sunrise, she had made her decision. She would find him. And when she did, she would uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Wrapped in a thick cloak, Amara set off through the forest, her steps light but sure. She knew the land better than anyone. She had grown up among the whispering trees, learned to read the wind as others read words on a page. But something was different now. Something was watching. The air was too still. The usual chirps of insects had faded. Amara's fingers tightened around the dagger at her waist. Then, a sound, so faint it was almost swallowed by the wind. A shift of weight, a breath. She wasn't alone. She moved as if she hadn't noticed, slowing just enough to force whoever was following her to reveal themselves. The rustling grew louder. Then, a sharp whistle cut through the air, followed by the unmistakable twang of a bowstring. Amara spun, dropping low. An arrow sailed over her head, embedding itself into a tree with a dull thunk. Her heart pounded, but she stayed calm. 3 attackers, armed, closing in. A trap. She acted before they could. With a swift movement, she reached into the pouch at her belt, grabbing a handful of crushed black lotus leaves. With a sharp exhale, she blew the powder into the air. Choking gasps erupted behind her. The poison worked fast. It burned the lungs, blurred the mind, made warriors stagger like drunkards. The moment they faltered, Amara ran. She didn't stop until the trees thinned and the outline of an old fortress rose in the distance. She had arrived. The village surrounding the fortress was a ghost town. Broken houses lined the dirt roads, their windows shattered, doors hanging off rusted hinges, a place long abandoned by hope. At its center stood the fortress, tall, cracked with age, but still standing, like a beast that refused to die. She barely had time to take it in before a voice slid through the silence. "You finally came." Amara turned sharply. The man from the night before stood near the fortress entrance, watching her. "You knew I would," she said. His smirk was slow, amused. "Of course, you're your father's daughter." The word sent a chill through her. She kept her voice steady. "Where is he?" The man gestured to the looming doors of the fortress. "Inside, waiting for you." Amara didn't move. Why now? Why did he send for me after all these years? The man tilted his head. "Because things are not as you believe." A flicker of doubt. For years she had built a version of the truth in her mind. Her father had abandoned them, left them to fend for themselves. But what if she had been wrong? She forced herself forward, stepping past the man. "Take me to him." The doors groaned as they opened, and she walked straight into the past. The inside of the fortress was colder than the night itself. The air smelled of damp stone and something older, something rotting. Torchlight flickered against the walls, casting long shadows as she was led deeper into the belly of the beast. The corridor narrowed, the silence thickened. Then they stopped. A heavy wooden door loomed before her. The man pushed it open. Amara stepped inside. At first, there was only darkness. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, and familiar. Her breath hitched. She had never seen him before, but she knew. Amara. The voice was deep, filled with something unreadable. Her father. The man who had abandoned her mother. The man who had brought death to their doorstep. The man who was supposed to be dead. Her fingers twitched toward the dagger at her side. "Why did you send for me?" she asked, voice like steel. His lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. "Because, my daughter, it's time you learned the truth." A cold, crawling sensation gripped her spine. The door slammed shut behind her. Silence stretched between them, thick with the way